This week we are looking to develop our database and we're going to look at queries. Before we move on with our database, let's look at our knowledge recall, and the 4 questions you need to answer this week in your e-portfolios are: why are forms used? So think back to last week, why do we use forms? What is a foreign key? And that's to do with your relational database, how the tables link together. What type of search systematically checks each item in order until the item is found? So you need to explain what type of search that would be to find an item. And thinking back to much earlier in the year, what type of compression permanently removes data? So you need to answer those 4 questions in your e-portfolio. You can pause the video while you complete those. So forms are used as an easier way to input data, or a better way to look at the data. A foreign key is what links the item in your database to an item in another table. With a linear search, that's where it systematically goes through one item after another till it finds the item it's looking for. And with lossy compression means that the data is permanently lost and will not be able to be restored when the item is put back together. So today we're going to look at queries and how we use them to search in a database. And if you think about how you search, whether it's online or in a paper search, which do you prefer? Which is easiest? And generally an online search gets the results that we want to. It's much quicker and finds the information, whereas a paper-based search could take some time and often doesn't result in finding the information we want. So if you were looking for a plumber, where would you look? You'd generally look online, and you could search that in a big database to find a plumber in your local area. So a query works like this. You could find all the people that have brown hair in a class, and it just identifies all of those with the hair colour brown. So looking at that one field, everybody has got brown hair. We can do an AND query. An AND query looks at more than one area. So if you have blonde hair and blue eyes, so we're looking at 2 different fields here. So we're looking at the hair colour being blonde and the eye colour being blue. So that's an AND query. An OR query is if we get everyone to stand up if they have green eyes or wear glasses. So it doesn't matter if it's one or the other. As long as one of them is happening, those people can stand up. So that's an OR query. And an AND query, stand up if you're wearing a watch and a ring. So that would be an AND query. We could also have a NOT query. Stand up if you do not wear glasses. So it does the opposite. So we've got AND, OR and NOT that we can be thinking about in our queries. So thinking back, we've set up our database for Blue Screen of Death, which are a new band, and we've got information in our database for who all the fans are and the venues and all the gigs that they've played at. So that's the database we've built up so far. Now we're going to find an easier way to search our database and find the information from the database that we want. And they're called queries. So it's a query is another way to ask a question in a database or search information in a database. So you need to understand that searching or asking a question is called a query. And there are many queries that you're going to answer today, and you're going to work through a set of queries to find the answers for your database. There's a couple of documents you need to be aware of. There's a help sheet that will help you through a query. And you can follow that if you're not sure how to perform a query. Alternatively, I'm going to show you in this video how to do a query. So we've got complete all the questions on the sheet. The sheet it's referring to is this sheet here, where there are lots of questions in the sheet. If I go back to the first question, it wants to know how many of Blue Screens of Death fans live in Birmingham. So I'm going to show you how to perform that query, and then you can put a screenshot of your query design here and then the table of results in here. So that's what we're looking at, who lives in Birmingham, and that'll be one of the first queries we look at. So if we go to our database, which we have here, At the moment it's blank, but on my left are my 3 tables and a couple forms that I made last week. So I can click on my fans table and I can look through to find who lives in Birmingham. So here's the first one. Fergal Scott lives in Birmingham. I carry on going through. I can find Peter Bernard lives in Birmingham. Keep going through until I find the next people that live in Birmingham and record all these. Now that's a very long way to find all the information out. So what we can do is a query that's going to find that information out much better. Not only that, I could easily miss somebody looking through this list. So that's why we run a query. So I'm actually just going to close this table for the time being. Right click, close. And I'm going to make a new query. So what I'm going to do is click create. And I'm going to go to a query design. Now it's going to ask me which table I wish to look in. I'm looking in my fans table. So I click fans and I can close my other tables for the time being. I can drag each one of these words into the next field area, but what's often easier is select the first one, hold down Control on your keyboard, and then Shift on your keyboard. My computer's slow then. Hold down Control. It's not working. Shift and down. So Shift and down and select all of them and just drag that into the first field, and it populates your whole query as to what information you want. So we was looking at Birmingham, which is one of the cities. So under city, I can just write the word Birmingham. I've written that in criteria underneath city. And that's Birmingham. And I can then just click this run button in the top left corner. And it finds all the people that live in Birmingham. If I just go back into design view, like we did in our table and our form, I'm going back into the design of my query. And we spoke earlier about doing AND queries. I could have all the people who live in Birmingham, if I just look here, and I could look for all the people that are maybe male. So I can go back to Birmingham, and under gender, I can write male. So this is an AND query because I'm looking for this field, gender field, and the city they live in. So when I run this, I get all the males that live in Birmingham. So I've just run an AND query. I'm going to take this out. I could go back to my table. So these were all the people that lived in Birmingham. I could also, when I look at my table, I've got people from other cities. So I'm going to go back to my query. I'm just going to close my table. So I've got now Leeds written in here. So this is an OR query. I've got city of Birmingham or the city of Leeds. So I can look for 2 different fields in the same field, 2 different answers in the same field. So this is an OR query. Now when I run this and I'm in my design and click the red exclamation mark, which is run, I get anybody that is in Birmingham or in Leeds. So that's an OR query. So I've shown you how to do 2 very basic queries there, Birmingham or Leeds. I'm just going to save that and call that one Birmingham or Leeds query, and that will save on the left hand side. So I've now got a section for queries. So that's that query. I'm actually going to right click and close this query, and what I'm going to look to do now is, as we've gone through this, you need to show evidence of your query in your query sheet. So show the design view, show the results, the table, and then you can go on to answer the next question. So who live in Manchester, which fans live in Peterborough, and you've got all the information here that you are having to complete. So we've got a date one here, that's just in the date field. You can ask that information and that information will be shown for you. And then we've got a how many Blue Screen of Death fans live in Birmingham and their surname begins with B. So that's a little bit more complex. So let's just build that one up a second. So now I'm going to create, design, query design. I'm putting that table in, add, close, hold down, click the first one, hold down shift and then the down arrow and drag it into the first field. So that was after city being Birmingham. And was it first name or surname? Just having a look. Surname begins with B. So I've got a B, and then I put a wild card in, which is an asterisk. So surname begins with B, and that's come up with 2 people that live in Birmingham, and surname begins with B. So if I just go back into my design of that, it's a little bit hard to see here, but I've just written I've just written B and then star, which is a wildcard. So it starts with B and then anything after that. The computer changes that to like B star. It tells it what it wants to be. So that's changed it, and then it knows what to look for. And that query will work. So that was going through looking for the question here, number 7. All the fans who live in Birmingham and their surname begins with B. So you can show the design, show the results. So there is my design. I can screen print that, and then when I run it, I can screen print my table to show the results. So that's what you're having to do for question number 7. The next question we're going to look at is question number 8. So we're looking at the fans that are over 18 years of age. So looking at the design of that, fans that are over 18 years. And what we can do is bring in our database design. And under the date of birth, we can put in a operator in here of less than. And I'm going to put the date of the 10th of the 5th, 2021. Now that's today's date. So I'm actually going to bring that back to 2003, which means there'll be 18 years. And when I run that query, so less than this, so all the ones who are over 18, it brings me a list of all the older ones that are therefore over 18. So there's the results for that query, and you can save that one. We're now going to try a slightly more complex query, and that is a relational query. So when I bring into number, one more thing. Yeah, number 10. Number 10 is looking for information from fans that went to Blue Screen of Death gig at the LG Arena in Peterborough. Now there's a few bits of information you need to know for that. So we're going to start a new query. So we can just close all. And looking at our fans table, we've got here our fans and our gigs and our venues. Now I'm just going to remember that the venues that we're looking for in the question will be Peterborough, LG Arena. So the fans in the LG Arena. So when I look at my fans at gig ID 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2, I'm going to do mine at gig 1. So I'm going to create a new query, and I'm going to go to query design, and this time we're adding in information from more than one table. So I'm going to add my 3 tables, and what we should see when we add those is our relationship, our one-to-many relationship from fan ID to fan ID. Here's the primary key, here's the foreign key, and gig ID being the primary key to the foreign key of gig ID here in the fans at gigs table. And I'm going to want to bring in certain bits of information. So I'm going to want to know the first name and their surname. And I'm going to bring in just their date of birth and gender. As well as that, I'm going to want to bring in the gig ID and the date of gig. So I've got that information there, and I might just have the gig venue name, and that's in my venue table. So I'm now performing a query on 3 separate tables, and I could find all the people from the gig ID being gig ID of 1, remember in my fans table, my gig venue table, that gig ID is 1, Peterborough, City of Peterborough. We'll look for those ones. So I'll go back to my query. Venue name is LG Arena. Now it's got to be exactly what it is in your table. So I'll go back to my gig venue name and just make sure my venue name LG Arena is in there. That's fine. Go back to my query, LG Arena, and gig ID. I'm just going to take that out because the question we were looking for is to show fans that went to blue screen gig at LG Arena in Peterborough. Sort this query by youngest to oldest. So I'm needing to find my youngest to oldest. So by date of birth, I can now put that as youngest first, so I want ascending. So going up, numbers going up. Youngest, that'll be oldest. Descending. So when I now run that query, design, run my query, these are all the ones that went to the LG Arena, and I've got the youngest first because their date of birth is latest. So that's youngest first. So that's worked the way that I want it to. So that is a relational query because I'm looking at information from more than one related table. It's slightly more complex to get my relational query. So that was queries completed. You need to show evidence in your work. You've got all your work here. You can just save that as well and update your table and show evidence in your ePortfolio.